All right, let's take a deep dive into the skies of history and talk about the incredible and maybe often overlooked legacy of French military aviation. You see, from the very beginning of flight, way before World War I even started, French engineers weren't just part of the race, they were out in front, really defining what was even possible up in the air.
And that is not an exaggeration at all. France was a true pioneer, a cornerstone in the whole story of aviation. For them, this wasn't just some passing hobby. It was a national obsession, a real spirit of invention that would pretty soon be forged into a weapon of war.
And this right here really captures the huge leap in technology we're about to see. We're going to trace the evolution from these early, almost delicate-looking wooden canvas machines all the way to the tough, hardened metal fighters that completely changed the game. So let's meet the aircraft that made history. Okay, so our story kicks off in the skies of the Great War. In just 4 short years, France became one of the world's top aircraft producers. And yeah, these early planes were often light, kind of slow, and pretty fragile. But the speed of innovation, it was absolutely mind-blowing. Aviation went from being a curiosity to a decisive military tool, just like that.
So, our first stop is the Blériot XI, and its story tells you everything you need to know about how new all of this was. See, this thing wasn't designed as a warplane. It was a civilian aircraft, famous for being the first to cross the English Channel. The military just saw it and went, hey, we can use that. Its job wasn't to fight, but to be the Army's eyes in the sky. Spotting enemy movements and training that first generation of combat pilots. So from seeing the enemy, we now move to hitting the enemy. The Voisin 3 was considered a heavy bomber back then. I mean, this was a real beast for the early days of the war. But it was slow, a real sitting duck in the daylight. So its crews took on these incredibly dangerous missions under the cover of darkness, basically inventing the art of night bombing as they went.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Just look at this little guy. The Nieuport 11, nicknamed Bebe or Baby, was a total game changer. While enemy planes were often big and clunky, the Bebe was small, incredibly nimble, and could outturn just about anything. That made it absolutely lethal in a dogfight, and it was a huge reason why France was able to reclaim air superiority back in 1916.
So, what do you do when you have a winning design like the Bebe? Well, you make it even better. That's what they did with the Nieuport 17. The thinking was simple. Take what works and give it more power. They slapped in a more powerful engine for more speed and beefed up the firepower. It turned a great design into one of the most iconic and successful French fighters of the entire war.
All right, next up, we see a totally different way of thinking with the Espiade VI. While the Nieuports were famous for being nimble acrobats, the Espiade was all about raw power and toughness. This thing was built for speed and for taking a beating and keeping on fighting. That's why it was a favorite of legendary aces, including the French national hero, Georges Guynemer.
And of course, that evolution logically led to the SPAD 13. It basically took the tough, proven airframe of the SPAD 7 and jammed in an even more powerful engine. What you got was a machine that could outclimb and outdive almost anything else in the sky. By the end of the war, a lot of people considered the SPAD 13 to be the absolute best fighter in the Allied arsenal.
To close out the World War I section, we've got a truly revolutionary aircraft, the Breguet 14. It was a bomber and a recon plane, sure, but what made it so important was how it was built. This was one of the first planes to be mass-produced using big chunks of metal instead of just wood. That meant it was way more durable and had better performance, a huge technological leap that was pointing right to the future of aviation.
Now, this is where we bridge the gap between the 2 world wars. You'd think France would be on top of the world, right? Well, they didn't stop innovating. But the years between the wars were messy. Political instability and a really inconsistent approach to modernization meant they lost valuable time. They designed some brilliant planes, but they just couldn't get them produced quickly enough. And that delay, it would turn out to be catastrophic.
So now we jump forward into the skies of the Second World War. The technology is way more advanced, the stakes are so much higher, and the French Air Force is facing some immense challenges. This quote just perfectly sets the stage for the tragic reality of 1939. I mean, on paper, France had a huge air force, but in reality, a lot of its planes were basically relics from another era, and they were about to go up against a much more modern and technologically superior enemy.
So let's meet the workhorse of 1940, the Morane-Saulnier MS-406. This was the fighter you'd see the most of in the French Air Force. Problem was, It was slower, less agile, and didn't have the firepower of its main rival, the German Messerschmitt Bf 109. But despite that, French pilots flew it with unbelievable courage against some truly overwhelming odds.
But France did have a truly world-class fighter. This was the Dewoitine D520. And this plane proved that French designers had absolutely not lost their touch. It could go toe-to-toe with the best German fighters out there. It was fast, well-armed, and agile, and it earned a deep respect from both the guys flying it and the guys flying against it. A real high point.
Next up is the Block MB-152. You can think of this one as a rugged interceptor. It was designed to do one thing: climb fast and attack enemy bombers. It was built like a tank and was a really stable platform for its heavy cannons. But all that toughness came at a cost to its overall performance, and it really struggled when it had to fight more nimble enemy fighters.
You know this saying, a jack of all trades but a master of none? Well, that was kind of the story of the Potez 63. This twin-engine plane was designed to do a lot of things. Be a heavy fighter, a night fighter, a recon plane. But that versatility was also its weakness, making it pretty vulnerable when it went up against more specialized single-engine fighters. Man, if one single plane could capture the tragedy of the French Air Force in 1940, it's this one. The Lioré Olivier 451 was a truly advanced bomber. It was sleek, fast, modern, right on par with anything the Germans had. The problem? Production was painfully slow. There just weren't enough of them in service when the invasion came. It's the ultimate story of too little too late.
And finally, we have the Farman F-222. I mean, just look at this thing. With that fixed landing gear and that boxy, angular design, it was hopelessly out of date by 1940, and yet it was still being used. A powerful symbol of how France was forced to fight with the equipment it had, not the equipment it desperately needed.
But the story doesn't just stop in 1940 with the fall of France. After the armistice, aircraft production actually continued under occupation. At the same time, Free French pilots were escaping to keep the fight going from abroad with the Allies, and this created a uniquely complicated situation. And this was the surreal result. Some of the very planes we've just talked about, like that excellent Dewoitine D520, ended up being used by both the collaborationist Vichy regime and the Free French forces fighting with the Allies. It's a uniquely tragic chapter where French pilots could literally find themselves fighting other Frenchmen in identical aircraft. So as we wrap this up, what's the big takeaway here? We've gone all the way from those fragile, pioneering biplanes of the First War to the complex, powerful fighters of the Second. Through victory, defeat, and resistance, the story of French aviation is one of brilliant innovation, but also, at times, tragic missed opportunities. It's a story that has left a permanent mark on military history.
And in the end, that's really the most important thing to remember. These weren't just machines made of wood, canvas, and metal. They were symbols. Symbols of a nation's ingenuity, its courage in a fight, its unbreakable will to resist, and its enduring national pride, even in the absolute darkest of times.